Greater Springfield Convention and Visitors Bureau, as well as Peter Roskothen, who's a established business leader in the Pioneer Valley, operates a number of establishments that to a degree are impacted by tourism coming in and out of the valley. But they're here today, after meeting with Commissioner Zuniga and I, to update us on their activities relative to partnerships with the Class 1 licensees in Western Massachusetts. So with that, I'll turn it over to Peter and Mary Kay.
Great. Thank you very much for having us. I am Mary Kay Weiger. I'm the president of the Greater Springfield Convention and Visitors Bureau, and I am joined by Peter Roskothen, the former chair of the board of directors for the Bureau and the current chair of our gaming commission, our committee focused on this very important initiative. I'm going to try to work my PowerPoint here and talk at the same time. We wanted to do 4 things today. We wanted to give you an overview of our organization. We also want to talk to you a little bit about our region and what we offer for tourism, familiarize you with what our assets are and how a casino will play a role in that list of offerings. We want to talk to you about the gaming process that we've been engaged in, show you a timeline of how long we've been following this, and then we have a request of you, the Gaming Commission. I always like to start by defining the GSCVB, and our mission statement does that. As you can see, we are an affiliate of the Economic Development Council. Tourism is big business in our region. It's an economic driver. We employ people. We generate jobs and taxes. Our job is very simple. It's promote the 3 counties of Massachusetts Pioneer Valley as a year-round destination for conventions, meetings, group tour, sports, and leisure travel. And I'll touch on each of those segments in my presentation. Quick overview. We are one of 16 regional tourist councils, RTCs. We use a lot of acronyms in our business. We work very closely with the Office of Travel and Tourism, Betsy Wall in the Mass office, MOT. We are the boots on the ground, if you will. Betsy's tasked with promoting the Commonwealth as a whole. We have unique regions within that Commonwealth. We're a true DMO, a destination marketing organization. We are not a chamber of commerce. The only target for us, our audience, are visitors to our region. We love it if they come and they stay, and many of them do. We have a number of colleges. They make the area their home, but really we're focused on people who are traveling 50 miles or more, spending time in our hotels, and taking part in the activities that we offer. Very small staff. Since we've met before, we actually have been in a hiring mode, and we've got 3 new employees since January, so we have 7 full-time employees and 1 part-time. We represent 250 members, many of them small businesses. We have a lot of big brands, and again, I'll talk a little bit about that when I show you our map, but we also represent a lot of independent operators, small restaurants, small B&Bs. We have both traditional and non-traditional members, the types of businesses that you would expect to support tourism, attractions, hotels, and restaurants, but then the purveyors, the suppliers to the industry, the linen suppliers, the food suppliers, the beverage distributors, and so forth. Our budget this year is a little over $1 million, and I showed you probably the 4 biggest sources of our funding and how we make up that $1.1 million. The Rally for the Valley Community Leadership. These are businesses that have made a very strong investment in tourism promotion. They stepped up when the economy turned and our budget turned, and they made a greater investment in the Greater Springfield Convention and Visitors Bureau, not only to promote their own business, but to promote the destination. Very proud of the group that's on this list, and you'll recognize some of them, and you'll see some of those purveyors as well. You'll see a credit union. You know, you might wonder, why is a credit union involved with a tourism agency? Those are his customers. If you talk to the gentleman who runs the credit union, the more people we employ, the more deposits he has in his credit union. So we're very far-reaching in terms of who we represent. This slide's important. I wanted to give you an idea. I know you're familiar with the 3 counties and where we are. Our logo kind of calls that out. In doing our brand studies, Pioneer Valley doesn't resonate very far. We needed to show people where in Massachusetts we are, and we needed to tell them it's Massachusetts. The map on the left is a great map because it gives you the idea, the type of attractions that we represent. If you're in Hampden County, you've got big commercial attractions like Six Flags, New England, in the Basketball Hall of Fame. The further north you go into the more eclectic collegiate towns, Amherst, Northampton, And then further to the north, up in Franklin County, it becomes a more serene, bucolic area with a lot of recreational opportunities, zip lining and whitewater rafting and so forth.
Is the far corner of the state next to New York, that's a different?
That is Berkshire County.
Oh, okay.
And
Oh,
we
of
do
course, yeah,
we
right,
do
right.
cover that area for our sports initiative, but for the other 3 segments, we focus
Right.
on the 3 counties. These are the segments that we try to reach, the types of visitors. Leisure visitors, obviously people on vacation. We tend to promote to families. We look at women as decision makers, bringing their children into our area. Again, if you look at the types of attractions that we have, they cater to children. Group tour, that's the bus business. Very lucrative business. Not all of our members can handle bus business, but those who do make a very strong approach in getting the groups to come, the buses to come. Yankee Candle does a lot of buses. Bright Nights at Forest Park, a big attraction, draws a lot of buses. There's a word missing on there, but it's meetings and conventions, and that's where I can't say enough about our strong partnership with the MCCA. They own and operate our, they own and Global Spectrum operates our Mass Mutual Center. We work with them on an initiative called Team Springfield. Springfield definitely leads the charge when it comes to conventions and meetings. The infrastructure is there to support meetings. We have a Marriott and a Sheraton, first-class hotels, full service with restaurants and meeting rooms, and then, of course, the Mass Mutual Center. The newest initiative that we've undertaken and our target has become sports. We want to capitalize on our history of sport. Both basketball and volleyball were created in the Pioneer Valley, invented. And we have the 14 colleges that I mentioned with a lot of playing fields. And we are making an effort to bring collegiate events, youth events, sports of all types into our region. Regardless of the market segment that we're trying to reach, we talk about the 3 A's. I make it as simple as I can for people. We're very easily accessible, 91 and 90 cross in our region. It's easy to get to. We're very affordable. We can usually beat other regions on rate, whether it's a venue or a hotel. And then we also have that abundance of attractions. So whether you're playing in a sporting event or at a meeting and you're there for a particular purpose, you're gonna have downtime. What else is there to do in the area? So that's what that's our selling platform. These are the feeder markets where we draw our visitors. In-state travel is very big, and Betsy Wall would reinforce that. We have a lot of people from the Boston area who come out to our region. We also reach into Connecticut and right on the cusp of New York. We anticipate adding a casino will introduce new feeder markets to us. We're hoping we'll reach into New York. We're hoping we'll get the Albany market, the Vermont, New Hampshire, as well as Canada. These are just some of the marketing tools that we use. We produce a guidebook. Obviously, social media is big. The Zombie Fest that's actually a billboard that's in the Connecticut area right now. We do a coupon book. We promote the region in a number of ways, and we've given you a package of materials for you to take a look at the work that we do.
What's the Zombie Fest?
The Zombie Fest is actually, we're bundling our assets in the month of October. Six Flags has an event they call Fright Fest. They extend their season and they're open on weekends. They decorate the park for like haunted happenings, and they have zombies. So we met with the big 4 attractions, and they're the big 4 based on research, not my own personal preference, but the leading attractions in our region are the Yankee Candle Company, the Basketball Hall of Fame, the Springfield Museums, and the Six Flags New England. And in talking to them, we wanted to leverage our marketing dollars. We wanted to band together and say, how can we, and this really is the job of a convention bureau. Everybody's marketing their own product. Our job is to tell the consumer that that product's next to that product. And while you're here going to this, you could also go to this. So Zombie Fest came about when we said, let's get together and market around a common theme. We didn't want to just create one out of thin air. We capitalized on the fact that Six Flags already has a zombie event going on, and so we've created programming around it. Peter runs a restaurant. He's going to do dining in the dark tomorrow night. We have some cemetery crawls and pub crawls and so forth. So we have a landing page, and we're promoting those assets.
We'd really like to think about joining you in that cemetery
Yeah,
call. I think that'd be hard to miss.
Actually, I'm busy.
Are you? Our sports commission, I talked a little bit about that. It's a new division within our bureau. We have hired a dedicated salesperson to go out and find sports business that we can host in our region. We have 12 commissioners who are focused on this, and we launched the initiative in April. And we're hopeful that that's going to bear some fruit for us. Hospitality services are very important in our region. We don't want to take for granted the fact that we've spent money, we've spent time, we've spent effort getting people to come. We want them to come back, and we want them to have a great experience in our region, and we believe in positive word of mouth. We have a staff person who's dedicated to making sure that when people in our region, they're taken care of. So if it's for conventions, there's hospitality services that are provided. If it's a tour group, we're providing goodie bags and information and trying to make their stay as easy as possible. We have a volunteer ambassador corps that really extends our staff. We have 30 people who come together on a regular basis, volunteer, and help us out in promoting the region and working events. And then we have a program called the Howdy Awards. I'm very proud of our program. It's basically our version of the Oscars, and we award 8 very hardworking individuals each spring. We have categories: food, beverage, attractions, transportation. We take nominations from the general public and visitors about the service that they've received. So they write an application and tell us what great service they've gotten. We put a group together, we judge them, and we recognize them. And we want, like I said, we want to make sure that people have a good experience when they're there in our region. So some numbers for you in terms of tourism spending in the Pioneer Valley. And again, we know we're made up of Hampden, Hampshire, Franklin County. We look at it as an aggregate. We look at the whole. And you can tell by the numbers too, kind of the description I gave you earlier, where the bulk of activity happens in the Hampden County region, and the further north you go, it kind of peters out. But every region needs the other, and visitors don't know counties. They know an area of the Commonwealth, and it's such a compact region. Again, the research shows that they do move around. So we employ over 4,000 people in our industry, and we would argue on some of the coding that they give to tourism job classification. We think it's a little higher. About $661 million is spent in the area in direct spending. The 4,000 people earn over $136 million in payroll, and there's about $49,000 paid in state and local taxes.
Almost like Macau.
We're very proud of this slide. That this is something that Western Mass Electric has produced in their economic report, but in terms of private employment mix and where we are in the rankings, you know, for years the Pioneer Valley was known for manufacturing, and tourism actually surpasses manufacturing now in our region. And then lodging data, just to compare our totals with Massachusetts. I mean, Boston definitely drives occupancy. They drive rate and RevPAR. You know, we are hopeful that with a casino that our numbers will grow. We feel there's...
What's RevPAR?
RevPAR is a combination of your rate and your room availability.
It's revenue
Revenue per available room.
Oh, per, right.
So we... you know, we are not Boston, we are not Cape Cod, we are not the Berkshires, and that's, I think, as Peter's going to talk to you a little bit about our position on gaming and why we've been so involved. We do see gaming as something exciting for our region and something that can, you know, the rising tides lift all boats. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Peter, who's going to talk to you a little bit about the process our organization has been involved in.
First and foremost, I also want to say on our behalf, thank you for having us here. It's a real pleasure. It's an honor. I have a passion for our area, and I have it really on 2 reasons. I own a 300-plus employee business, and the better our region does, obviously, I would hope the better my business does, and it's a pretty selfish but honest piece. But we live in an area in Western Mass that's truly amazing. I wasn't born there. I'm imported to that area. And we almost never have a traffic jam. We have amazing nature. It's a pleasure to live there. And so I'm one of those people, together with a lot of folks, that we work very hard, and this is part of my passion with the Bureau, to promote the area, to bring more people into the area, to figure out ways to make sure they stay a little longer. And I, together with quite a few folks, believe that this casino is one of those things that could help us. And we're obviously in favor of it, if that's not very clear. We as a bureau have been promoting a casino one way or another back to 1994. So if you follow a little bit the arrows that you see on the slide, we started the process, and we restarted the process in 2002. 2007, we took a membership poll to just understand if our members still wanted a casino in our area in order to represent them. The answer was yes. We formed the gaming committee back in 2010, which I am the chair of today, and we work very hard at being neutral. I just want to make sure that's also very clear. None of us have an affiliation with any of the developers. We're just kind of as neutral as we can be and passionate about trying to make sure it's done right. In 2010, we support the bill that eventually was enacted as law. I was also very proud of our involvement in 2011 when the House had introduced 0.5% for tourism, and we were able to move that to 1%. And that's something that we're quite excited about, and hope that some of the money gets funded into tourism in Massachusetts. Obviously the law got enacted, and now we're aggressively trying to support this law and these developers, and trying to also figure out a way to engage with these developers in how does the whole region get promoted. Not specifically the town or the city that they're in, but we're really looking at this from the whole region's perspective. And I say the other passion that I have on this promotion piece for the gambling in our area, if it happens, is we truly represent the smaller businesses. I know a developer is going to make a deal with a Yankee Candle and figure out some sort of connection, or they're going to do it with Six Flags. They're not going to do it with every restaurant in Northampton, or they're not going to do it with a lot of other players. That all of us should kind of rise with the tide. And so the passion for us is the small business, to be pretty straightforward with you, and I think the passion is to try to do something regional. Probably the two main reasons we're here. We believe that a casino will add new visitors to the area. It will give a chance to an existing visitor to stay longer and to bring other visitors back into the area. Today, we have two companies left in our area that you can choose to pick one of them or none of them. But the fact is that we're dealing and we're in conversations with both of these companies, MGM and Mohegan Sun. There's a little piece on the slide that says MOU or endorsement. Those are the conversations we're having with the two developers right now. And I would hope, sincerely hope, that we can enter into a memorandum of understanding with both of those developers. Much rather see that than an endorsement. And a memorandum of understanding, and we're going to outline some of the things that we're looking for. The key things that we were looking for is a points program to help some of the small business. So in the conversations we're having with both of these developers, we're trying to see if that's possible, and if it's possible, how. We want to be part and work with each other on an internal, integrated online and social media cross-promotion campaign. There's so many opportunities to use visitors to the valley or visitors to this casino and find ways to cross-promote it. So we want to set up some sort of structure for that. We do want to encourage and are strongly advocating in favor of finding ways that these casino developers help moving people around the valley. So regardless of where the casino is, can we set up some sort of low-cost, no-cost transportation system that integrates different attractions, different areas with the casino guests? We want them to be part of our regional marketing funds. And I'm going to use this opportunity to say we have really adopted the angle. We're not asking for money. Don't make us wealthy. Don't give us money to hire an assistant for Mary Kay or we want to work together. We want to create a marketing budget together that promotes the region as a whole. Not the casino individually, not the region individually, but the region and the casino together. And so we're asking them to participate in our regional marketing funds. The Sports Commission kind of irrelevant to gaming, but pretty important to us. There's so many assets in Western Mass where fields and things are happening. There's already a lot of this activity happening where sports activities are happening. A sports commission support is something we're hoping a casino developer gets involved with. And then we're also asking them to be a very active member of the Convention and Visitors Bureau. Active for us means we want them to be a stakeholder at the table. We want them to be part of a board process, executive committee process, be part of the decisions. How do we promote the entire region? And we want them to sit at the table and want one of the key people to sit at the table. We're really looking for a partnership, and I can't stress that word enough. I feel bad when I look at the casino developers and I can see them being asked for this sponsorship or that sponsorship, pay for this fireworks, do this. Our approach is a little bit different. Our approach is really, how do we market together to truly extend the stay or get a new stay? Because if people are staying longer or have more reasons to come, then I think the whole region will benefit. This partnership is probably a little bit of the angle where we're having most of the challenges. And I'm going to cover those in a couple seconds. In return, what do we offer to the developer? We believe, again, that we represent small business, so we want to be that link to the small hospitality businesses in the Pioneer Valley. Nobody's much better than Mary Kay and her team, and I sit on the board, I don't have to say this, but we're very lucky to have this team. And the regional marketing knowledge and understanding the challenges and the great things that happen in the market is something we bring to the table. We're going to bring them access to the key Pioneer Valley tourism leaders. We have resources, which is very important to note. We, as members, all of us give and contribute money to the Bureau. The state contributes money to the Bureau, so we're just leveraging. If the casino also gives us some resources, those funds are all put together in the same pot, and they will leverage and make us a little more effective. And the last thing that I think we offer is we will definitely help a casino developer be perceived, but more importantly, truly become a team player in the region and a leader in the attraction category for the region. On the challenges side of things that we're having, I think if you talked to us a month ago or two, we would have felt and would have sounded extremely discouraged when we had the meeting with Mr. Sunya and Mr. Stevens. That's sort of kind of what was happening at that point. We felt there was a lot of fluff, amazing presentations, great things going on. I am proud and happy to report that we've had some very meaningful conversations in hopes that we can get to some sort of agreement that can be part of the package that they present to you the end of December. I think one of the key challenges is, again, that we're a marketing partner, that they clearly understand that we're a marketing partner. We want the casino to be that regional player, not just a city or town player. I think that's a key angle that we want to do work on that. The conversation of memorandum of understanding and endorsement is a challenge. Very difficult for us to sit there and pick. And ideally, I would ask you all, hopefully we have an understanding with the two developers, if they're both qualified at the end, and you just make the choice. I'd much rather be in that position than sitting in a board meeting in a few weeks and being forced to endorse one over the other one, because I think both projects have merits, and both projects, if we can develop an agreement with them, I think it's a good thing for us. We have not gotten very specific regional marketing plans for them. We're still challenged today with that. Specifically, one developer had a sum of money disclosed in their agreement with the city that involved our name in that. And we were not at all aware of those dollars. They were never discussed by our organization. And we still today don't clearly know how that money is being spent and why our name is attached to it if we're not involved in how that money is being spent. Again, the small business thing, you're going to hear us say that quite a few times. And then we're working strongly in heart, and I think we're making a lot of progress in identifying the cross-promotional opportunities between what we can do and what the casino can do in our area. So some of the key things that we're discussing. Love to turn this into a little bit of a questions or thoughts, or if there's anything that we can add to this. But I guess in a pretty straightforward way, what that slide says is what we're asking you to please consider, that there is some sort of documented agreement between a developer and us, and I would encourage any other Convention and Visitors Bureau to do the same thing with their casinos in their own areas, that is mutually beneficial. That's a key word on that slide. So those are some of my key remarks. Love to elaborate. Mary Kay and I don't know if I missed something that needed to be said.
I have a couple of questions, and thank you for this presentation. I think it's very helpful. It's good to hear that you are having more meaningful conversations since we last met. Actually, the field has narrowed down to 2, and maybe that's in and of itself a little bit more, the genesis of those fruitful conversations. But I'm curious, in the point that the slide that you point out as to what the principles that you are seeking in terms of that partnership, the points program to develop small business, the social media, the cross promotions. Are you getting to some good details, or is this really still at the principle level and where you need to kind of bring it down? I'm just curious as to some of the details.
Both of us can attempt to answer that. I'm going to be first and foremost fair. I think the developers, as we've chatted with them, we're not expecting to get into this kind of detail at this stage. And from our perspective, we've been really working this hard for a long time. We're feeling that right now the detail is more important than ever. If this is part of your application, if this is part of the process, we're looking for detail. So I would say literally over the last week, that's how recent this is, we have gotten to some detail. We've gotten some black and white answers of some things that are not possible, and some things that are possible. And I think the challenge today in those conversations is, to be pretty blunt, are we getting enough for it to be worth it? And I'm speaking as a neutral business person here, but signing an agreement just for the sake of signing an agreement for us is probably not something I'll recommend to our board. And I'm just hoping that it's a quality agreement, an unselfish agreement, and a two-sided agreement. And I think we're still working hard at that.
I would echo what Peter said. I do think that they're surprised at the level of detail that we're seeking. But again, we're using the due diligence we did in talking to communities who welcomed casino operators, all of whom said to us, make sure you reach an agreement up front that is detailed so that you don't go down the road, the doors open, and then you're out on your own. So, and I would also echo what Peter said, the level of engagement over the past week has been quite good.
I also think there was a feeling that the agreement that they made with the host community would cover most of what we wanted. And to be honest with you, that's not the case. I think the host community in both cases, and specifically in Springfield, is extremely well taken care of. And I'm very happy about that, because I think Springfield, if they get a casino, can use this kind of agreement with the developer. My concern and our concern is more, how is the region impacted? And again, how do we get all the hospitality businesses to benefit from this? And how is the casino truly part of the community and not unto itself?
One thing that we actually talked about this morning, you may not have been here, some of the dynamics that now we look back and can appreciate with a little bit more clarity, is that by necessity these developers were first focused on the host community, because of course they had to. Yeah. Without their input, there's no siting. Without the referendum, there's no project. And are now only after that beginning to look at the surrounding communities. There's a mitigation conversation on surrounding communities that developers will undertake either collectively or one by one. And at least from this morning's presentation of what's going on in the Category 2, some of the concerns from some of these surrounding communities directly apply to concerns like you. What happens to the small business, as part of other concerns as well. So I would point to that example as what could happen very quickly as soon as these two players in your region really begin in earnest the surrounding community mitigation conversations.
I agree, Commissioner, and I think the only thing that I'm not worried but want to point out here is that the conversations I see happening in our market are individual small business driven, how to work with the casinos. That's a big part of what I'm hearing about. And our piece specifically is focused on tourism. I believe the casino is an amazing economic driver that could help our area. And the long-term part of the real long-term gain for us, in addition to the employment and the construction jobs and all of that, is all the extra tourism dollars and guests that we can get in our market. And so I think some of these conversations are here, and I hear, because I don't have a fact on that, is conversations about maybe meeting with the neighboring town on some sort of financial arrangement. But that does not necessarily include promoting tourism, or more importantly, how do we work together in tourism, which is kind of what we're bringing to the table.
Let's get right to the heart of the matter. What your request was, you requested that we require, as part of an application, an agreement, whatever those modifying words were, a mutually beneficial agreement with the Greater Springfield Convention and Visitors Bureau and an applicant. I don't know that we can do that, but there's already a tremendous amount of incentive to promote and collaborate with the regional tourism industry, both in the legislation and in our regs and in our application form. And Commissioner Stebbins, as you know, is in charge of evaluating the economic development side of this and tourism of the proposals of the applications, and tourism falls into that umbrella, as well as in our overview evaluation criteria. We're looking for extraordinary measures. So it's certainly been, well, I think, and let me ask you, I think we've promoted it pretty aggressively as a criteria. So they know, all the bidders know, that they need to address this issue, and that it will redound substantially to their credit to develop these relationships. And if somebody did execute the kind of agreement that you're talking about, I think it's safe to say from things we've already said and done that would also redound very much to somebody's credit in the evaluation criteria. But I don't know that we can go further than that, and that's the request from you that's on the table. And when I say I don't know, I mean I don't know, not that we can't. But Commissioner Stebbins, this is your area. I mean, what do you think about this?
Well, it's, I think as you look at the application, I know you've had the opportunity to look at the application, you delve into the regional tourism section under economic development. Question 3-24, local agreements, provide local agreements designed to expand gaming establishments. 3-25, cross-marketing, provide plans to demonstrate how you will cross-market with other attractions. 3-26, collaboration with tourism and other industry, provide plans. So it's obviously, we're requesting of the applicants to provide us something more than, mailing in an answer. Hopefully they've given it a lot of thought. Obviously we didn't come up with one application form for Western Mass and one application form for Boston, but I think what you're driving towards is been responded to by the Commission, just in terms of how we've laid, and you've been a big impetus for how those questions were laid out, looking for those detailed plans. And I think, the follow-up question at some point that the Commission will have is these agreements that are entered into, that are part of an applicant's package. You know, how does this commission make sure that an applicant sticks to those promises? Because what's the point of having the signed agreement, a piece of paper, if once a license is awarded, everybody walks off in different directions? I don't think that's anywhere close to what our intentions or our goals of, by requiring those questions specifically in the application form. So I think we laid out the questions to get to, in your case, you know, the effort that you wanted to see put forth by applicants, and we obviously thought it was a worthwhile exercise to hopefully be duplicated in the other regions.
I think we've always been on the same page on that, to be straightforward. I think a month ago, and still a little bit today, I gotta repeat that point, we were concerned. These conversations were not happening. And the application is due to you in December, end of December, based on what I understand. We weren't seeing them, not on the tourism side.
Well, I would suggest to you, and we've experienced this in the past when we've had this type of discussion at one of our public meetings. You know, the reaction from the applicants to focus on some of the topics that happen to come up during our meetings. So hopefully, you know, your presence here today will maybe spur on that interaction with the applicants out in Western Mass, and hopefully come December, you know, when the application deadlines are, you know, comes, that you guys will feel pretty comfortable with the level of interaction and success you've had with the two applicants in Western Mass.
We thank you for the opportunity to be here today to elevate tourism in terms of its being a priority in the application process. We thank you for listening to us. If
Well,
you have
and
more questions.
kudos to you, because I think you've been a lot more proactive than maybe some of your
Thank you.
other sister agencies across the state.
We really work hard in Western Mass to make it better, and honestly believe this is an opportunity to make it better. Just got to make sure it's done right. Any other questions that we can answer?
Have you raised with the two applicants the specific questions that Commissioner Stebbins, just this specific criteria that Commissioner Stebbins mentioned?
We have in conversations, yes.
You have.
Yeah. And at this stage, the conversations are going back and forth. Again, we've had some very good progress. We're not where we, or at least I think we should be today, but
Right.
we're a lot better than we were a few weeks ago.
Right. Well, the Commission's made it clear, as we've said, that this is an important part of it. We'll continue to make it clear, even though it's an agreement with you we can't make it a requirement. But
And again, our key angle with them is marketing partnerships.
Right.
We're not holding out our hand. We
Right.
don't want an extra staff person. I gotta make that so clear. It's a passion about promoting the market and doing more together.
Right, right. A joint venture.
Yeah.
Right.
On that note, I think, in my opinion, your approach is very objective and very good. You bring power in terms of the numbers of your membership, your regional approach, your pragmatic approach on the principles that I was just talking about, which, you know, any smart developer will be remiss if they didn't recognize that. So I think I
We-
echo the kudos and congratulate you with, in terms of, you know, being as specific as you are and as proactive as you have been.
We bring efficiencies, I think, too, in that, you know, a developer can go directly to Six Flags and strike a deal and write about it in their application, so that you're going to see documentation of a partnership. They can go directly to a Yankee Candle, the bigger players. I can't stress enough how we feel very strongly that we're kind of the voice of that smaller business that they might not think about, and they might not have an idea that, ooh, I should be telling my customers about that special restaurant or that special place. So that's really what we're attempting.
Plus Yankee Candle and Six Flags are also in your membership.
Exactly.
And they're key members.
They're partners. Yep.
I think we've said many times in many contexts that this is the point of maximum leverage for conversations with these folks, as the out-of-state people have advised you as well. And it sounds like you're playing hardball in your negotiations, and you're trying to insist on real, serious stuff, not just warm and fuzzy. And I commend that you keep doing that. And chances,
Mr. Chair.
given how clear these are as explicit criteria, I wouldn't be surprised that the progress that you've seen will continue. And hopefully, as others have said, the fact that you're here today, they all watch these things. You know, everybody knows who we talk to and what we talk about. This matters a lot to us because it matters a lot to the legislature, because it matters a lot to the Commonwealth. And we will be watching how these negotiations and conversations proceed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Chair.
you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you to all of you again to see us here today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, where are we? I think we are back to topic number 4, administration, and we are going to turn to Executive Director Rick Day to pick up.
Thank you,
Thanks for
Mr.
coming,
Chairman.
folks.
Members of the commission, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
This is actually a very exciting, this as part of my general update today, it's an exciting moment for me because we have completed the selections for the director's management branch. So I'd like to introduce, if I might, to my right, immediate right is Derek Lennon. Derek comes with us for about 13 years of experience with the Commonwealth in budget and finance, beginning with the House Ways and Means Committee as its budget analyst, and through a position with the as Chief Financial Officer with Housing and Economic Development. And Derek will be joining us Monday as our Chief Financial and Accounting Officer. Right next to him, I think you may have already met John Glennon. John was actually helping us out yesterday. John has, if I count correctly, somewhere in the area of 30 years of private and public experience with information technology, most recently with 8 years with the Commonwealth, including about 2 years as the Deputy Chief Information Officer. So I wanted to welcome both of the gentlemen next to me to the commission. They will both start Monday.
Yay.
And, yes, and the interesting thing about that is they'll start their orientation with our new human resource manager. So
Right.
it's,
Great.
Good.
it's a success all the way around. So I
Well-
don't know if the commission may have any questions to ask or vice versa, gentlemen. Yeah.
Questions?
I heard, had several calls from old colleagues of mine at Executive Office of Economic Affairs talking about how sorry they were to lose Derek to the commission, but I said, too bad. So that's great to have you on board.
I've gotten to know both Derek and John during the vetting process, and I think we're really very fortunate to have both of them. And the timing couldn't be better, and so delighted that you're here.
Delighted to be here. Appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, I would just add my 2 cents, the same thing, you know, that we're growing at a relatively, not quite up to Macau standards, but an explosive rate. And both the CFAO and CIO roles are ones that we've been longing for, functions are ones that we've been longing for a long time. And we need you to hit the ground running for sure, but we also need big picture thinking. You know, we really need, you're in strategic positions as well as tactical operational positions, and we really need big picture strategic thinking about how we can get ourselves set up properly to do our jobs. So I also welcome you and look forward to getting to know you, and look forward to many long nights.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, and you're free to leave whenever you want to, or you can stay around and watch if you wish. We'll see you Monday.
Thank
But they can stick around and watch our master schedule conversation.
They
Yeah.
could.
They get read right in.
Right.
The,
Begin the long nights.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I might just ask you before I start that part of the presentation, because it's could be fairly lengthy, depending on how much questions we get from the commission. But might be prudent to take racing, and because have a couple votes there, and then
Okay, good.
release Jennifer if she
Yeah,
wishes to.
good.
Director Day?
Before you start, I just want to thank you for yesterday. That was I think it was really well done.
Yeah, it was
Really
Excellent.
fascinating. We learned a lot, really well done. I think the comment from Spadia, about his appreciation that we asked for their opinion, I think that was for real. They weren't just blowing smoke, and I think those folks appreciated the fact the roles were reversed, and they understood how much we were interested in what they had to say. So I just thank you for that. I think that went great. It was really time well spent.
Well, and I want to thank you all for your attendance and just remind you that the Racing Division, as part of the Massachusetts Gaming Commission, takes the mission statement very seriously, and part of that is transparency and part of that is participation. So,
And just, following up on the conversations, those two issues that we had about, is there anything we can do? I think we need to meet with those folks soon to make that happen.
one has already been arranged, the other's in the works.
Great, okay, terrific.
So we'll start with an administrative update, and carrying on with that, yesterday, of course, we had the first of what we hope would be many annual horse racing forums here in this very room. We had chief executive officers from the Jockey Club, United States Trotting Association, and the chair of the Racing Medication and Testing Consortium here to provide an overview of racing at the national level in the morning's informational session. And then we had a panel of local stakeholders in the afternoon, as you know, discussing the implications of the Expanded Gaming Act on horse racing in Massachusetts. The sessions were extremely well attended by our industry's busy occupational licensees, members of the public, and the entire commission. And one of the things that I'm really proud of was that this forum marked the first time that the members of those organizations have had public dialogue since the late September announcement by the USTA that it was withdrawing support of the new set of rules regarding controlled therapeutic medications, along with its membership from the RMTC. And the dialogue between the leaders of these three organizations, I think, can be characterized as thoughtful, articulate, and constructive. And the amount of respect that they showed for each other and their philosophical differences, I think, to a complicated issue was really something to behold. And I'm really proud to say that it happened here. It happened in Massachusetts, and that's fantastic. We'll talk a little bit more about the specifics of that when we get to item 7C, which are those recommended rule changes. I want to report that there is some legislation affecting racing that's up for consideration right now. Senate Bill 1879, an act relative to simulcasting horse races in the Commonwealth, was heard by committee yesterday. This is an act similar in form and function to those passed in the previous 2 years to amend the number of live racing days and race numbers required to be able to conduct simulcasting from 100 and 900, respectively, to 80 and 720. I believe the bill is expected to pass, so the Racing Division anticipates that we would bring it before the Commission for regulatory approval at a pretty upcoming meeting. Suffolk Downs was recently reaccredited by the...
Can I ask you a question
Yes,
about that? Where
absolutely.
did that bill come from?
That bill was introduced in September, I believe, from the senator from East Boston, Senator Petroselli.
We've talked about this before.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Did we?
Maybe
Yeah.
you were
Happens
away
every
or
year.
Maybe I was asleep.
Sleep, yeah.
Can I ask a question?
You sure can.
How many days the simulcasting goes from in the proposed bill?
So the statute, the simulcasting statute, requires that live racing licensees conduct 100 days of racing and no fewer than 900 live races.
900
Yep,
live
900.
races.
Yep, and so what has happened the last 2 years and what has been introduced again this year is to reduce that requirement from 100 days to 80 days and from 900 races to 720 races. And that's a requirement to conduct simulcasting. The statute for live racing itself, the licenses do not require any certain number of days, but in order to conduct simulcasting, that's the live racing schedule you need to comply with, with which you need to comply.
And would apply to 2014,
For this year. Actually, that's for this year.
13.
Yep,
13.
for 2013. And the language is fairly similar to what it's been in the last 2 years, where it will sunset on December 31st. So it'll amend it for this season, and then it's repealed on January 1st.
Thank you.
Have I thoroughly confused the matter?
No,
We're good.
no,
That's
Okay.
fine.
All right. Suffolk Downs was recently reaccredited, I think as you heard yesterday, by the National Thoroughbred Racing Association Safety and Integrity Alliance. This is a voluntary accreditation program whereby member racetracks pledge support to a uniform code of standards covering 6 key areas: injury reporting and prevention, safer racing environment, safety research, wagering security, aftercare and transition of retired racehorses, and uniform medication testing and penalties. The process involves a lengthy application, followed by a 2-day on-site visit by a team of independent evaluators who kick the tires and check under the hood, if you will. Accreditation is good for a 2-year period, and each year the Code of Standards is enhanced, resulting in incremental change. The bar gets a little bit higher every year. This is particularly important to us because about 40% of that code is within the regulatory agency's control. A lot of them having to do with the Commission's veterinary policies and enhanced medication regulations. We're pleased to note that several of the Commission's policies and medication regulations receive best practices commendations, and Suffolk's approaches to substance abuse and addiction treatment and its ongoing commitment to aftercare and retirement programs remain benchmarks in the industry. So high marks from the Safety and Integrity Alliance. That's all I have for the administrative update. If you have any housekeeping questions for me.
Remind me of the percentage of tracks that are accredited to date.
I can't tell you the percentage, but I believe the number of tracks is 24.
Okay.
And if the bill goes through, when will the meets stop?
The 80-day schedule for Suffolk Downs would have their last day of live racing on Saturday, November 2nd. And Plain Ridge, the indications that we've had is that they would keep the scheduled 100 days of racing, but that they need relief on the number of live races conducted. So they would finish racing on the Saturday after Thanksgiving, and I can't remember what date that is, but November 20-something.
Okay. Thanks.
So that would bring us to item 7B, which is the 2012 annual report. This has come back to you. We sent a draft version with a lot of formatting errors and other typos at the meeting 2 weeks ago. Those have been cleaned up, and I'm happy to take any questions on any of the content or anything else that you would like to discuss.
Did I had just a couple of minor questions.
Sure.
Did I understand you when you presented the draft to say that this was the form that has been used since Columbus, and that you are planning to have a new form next year?
We absolutely are. We've assembled a library of the annual reports from other jurisdictions. The statute is actually silent as to the content other than some of the
Right.
accounting numbers. And so we think we receive a number of public records requests for these, particularly from students in agribusiness and equine industry programs. So we think that we can present the needed information, the accounting information, but also some informational and educational information that'll help the industry, and do it in a way that has a little more pizzazz and flair and appeal to the eye.
Well, that'd be great, because there is a wealth of financial information in here, but I found it very difficult to extract and correlate. It's hard to figure out, for me at least, how one set of numbers relates to the other. I know, so the form is the one that we've used in the past, but anything we can do to clean that up and make it more intelligible would be great, because there's a wealth of data here.
Absolutely, and the way in which some of those numbers are presented, I think we can find some more useful ways of presenting the same information.
Right. The only other question I had is on page 29, we are presenting 2011 an analysis of persons paid in 2011 compared to statutory requirements.
Correct.
Why is that?
So at the end of the calendar year, so at the end of 2013 for this year,
Yeah.
there's a statutory purse audit that is required, and that actually goes back and looks at the previous calendar year to make sure that the amounts that were paid out met the statutory requirements. So at the end of 2012, which was the year that this report covers, they were doing the audit for 2011.
Okay, so this is to fulfill a statutory requirement.
It is, yep.
Yeah,
And
that's
the-
the kind of thing that,
Exactly,
Yeah.
right to your point.
right. Okay.
Yeah, I would echo the same points. I would just add that we will continue, is my guess, to have the difficulty in terms of operating on a fiscal year basis, which ends June 30th, and reporting on an annual calendar basis.
That's the thing that runs through this.
Which overlays some of those difficulties, but I don't know if that's really going to go away. I doubt that it will. We can make it more user friendly, and I look forward to that.
We can, and different jurisdictions have different approaches to that, because we're not the only place that has seasonal racing that covers that takes place in 2 different fiscal years.
Right.
So we can look at what the other jurisdictions, how they approach that.
I don't know how much time and money we want to put into this, but it's worth thinking about, from the graphics standpoint. There are people that are professional at figuring out how to present numbers in a way that common folks can understand, and we'll certainly be moving that way in our own report.
Yep.
Okay.
Absolutely.
The other thing is that you mentioned this in here, obviously you're well aware of it, but just to remind everybody that this report is submitted by us to the legislature, but it is for a year where the facility, the agency, was still run by the Department of Public Licensure. We didn't run the agency during this year. We took it over at the end of this year and started. So the next year's report will be our first year of actual running this division.
Right, and so this was the 77th annual report, and next year we will have the first.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, good point. All right, so do we need a motion?
We do need a motion.
77th year.
So you were near on the Columbus Point.
You remember when it opened, right?
Well, I do.
To Commissioner McHugh's point, which he didn't realize he wandered into this, we are in possession, of course, of copies of all of the previous annual year's reports. And I am, once the Keeneland meet in Kentucky finishes, they're running in October, they have the largest library in the country of racing-related stuff, and not just books, not just journals, not just publications. And I think that they would be very interested in working with us through some kind of a program to digitize this and have, not only for our own records, but to have it available there as well. Because there's some tremendous history in racing in Massachusetts.
Yeah, there has been.
That'd be great
That'd
to
be
see.
great. That'd
Yeah.
be great.
It'd
That's
be
a
fun
great
to see,
idea.
yeah.
I wonder what happened to the helicopter. That could be, right? They had a
I don't know if there's
helicopter. The
pictures.
commissioners traveled by helicopter.
Oh, really?
Really?
They did.
We gotta
Where,
think-
where is that?
It was a state racing commission helicopter, and they would pick up the commissioners to take them to the tracks and
What are
or
we,
to
chopped
meetings. Yeah.
I think, yeah.
The,
we ought to work
Jennifer's
that into the
getting her
budget.
pilot's
The new
license as we
CFAO.
talk.
executive assistant out at Plain Ridge has all of the history. She's been working with the
Right.
commission for 50-some-odd years.
All right.
Great. Somebody want to move? Make a
So I
motion?
move, sure, I'll move that we accept, the commission accept and approve of the annual report of the racing operations in the Commonwealth in the form contained in the meeting materials.
Second.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it unanimously. And who do you submit this to?
This goes, that's outlined in the statute. It goes up to the legislature.
To the
Excuse me
various-
while I grab that.
Various parties.
Various committees, yeah.
Yep, and
Yep.
committees.
That's on tomorrow's to-do list. Then that would bring us to item 7C, which was some proposed changes to 205 CMR 3.29 and 4.52 medications and prohibited substances. In your packet is the latest memo that I have composed, which summarizes the story thus far. The red line, I left the red line in the final form just so we could remind ourselves of what the changes are. And then I've also copied all of the materials that were presented at last week's public hearing on October 9th, as well as I think we had two or three public comments were received during that time. So I can review the story thus far through the memo if you would like. I think we had 3 commissioners in attendance at the public hearing. If you have any comments about anything that was said there, I would just draw your attention to the fact that we did at the public meeting bring forth a proposed additional change, which involved eliminating a threshold for an anabolic steroid called stanozolol. And we did that based on an action that the RMTC, the Racing Medication and Testing Consortium, had voted on about a week before our public hearing. But it turns out that there's going to be additional changes to the anabolic steroid rule in general. So I think at the moment this rule is functional. It serves our purposes just fine, and I think what we'll do is we will wait until such time as that rule is amended in its entirety rather than do it piecemeal. So what is before you is the original red line version that was presented to you at the beginning of the process.
Well, that was the only question I had. We are leaving, we are allowing some stanozolol.
Yep, stanozolol. This is in,
Even though this other group has said we shouldn't allow any.
so that was the Racing Medication and Testing Consortium. The next stop for the elimination of the threshold in the model rules process will be in December at the RCI meeting, the Racing Commissioners International meeting. So our change actually was a little bit preliminary. I was kind of doing it under an efficiency standpoint, and also the fact that we were not the only jurisdiction that would have that rule in place. But since there are anticipated to be other amendments coming forth in December, I think it makes sense for us just to sit and wait for the Racing Commissioner International's Model Rules Committee determination.
Okay. And will everybody that's adopted these uniform rules have this, what's in 8B1, the way we have it? Is that what the model rules are?
Yes, the 8B1 on stanozolol, that threshold is the current model rule.
Okay.
Yep. The change for us is that as we had adopted the rule last year, we were looking at anabolic steroids in urine and not in blood.
Right.
And so that's what the red line is here, is we're adding that threshold in blood.
Okay.
Director, will this require some kind of a training program once we adopt this so that the veterinarians as well as the stewards and judges understand, especially with points for violations, suspensions? Will that require some kind of a training?
Yep, so the key changes here, there's some minor changes, but the key changes here are to, as you're pointing out, the penalty structure, in addition to that controlled therapeutic medication schedule. We've already adopted the thresholds in the controlled therapeutic schedule for 20 of the 24 substances. We've also been keeping records from the laboratory of the additional 4 substances and the levels in which we're seeing them. So we know exactly what we need to do to educate our stakeholders on those other 4 levels for next year. And there is some education we have to do. And that's fine. On the penalty structure, the stewards and judges, yes, there will be some training. And in fact, I believe there's a conference call scheduled with Racing Officials Accreditation Program next week to discuss the training program for that. So in other words, accredited stewards, accredited judges will have a formal training program available to them, and then we will be developing some in-house policy and some documentation and reviewing that before the meet starts next year.
Excellent. Thank you.
Occupational licensees will put something together for them as well. One of the best practices that we were cited for by the NTRA was our educational manuals that we provide to occupational licensees. So that'll be an important component of that for next year.
Excellent.
From your memo, it looks like only 3 states in the Northeast are on target to hit that January target date in 2014, just by where they are in terms of proposing the regulatory changes. Do you have any updates or any status on, it looks like Delaware, New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia, whether they're close behind or whether we're kind of still out in front with those 2 other states?
So West Virginia has to do it through statute.
Okay.
Their thresholds are actually in statute, and that process has started. The other 4 states, their rulemaking process may be a 30 or 45-day process, I'm not sure. So they may have not started it because they haven't needed to start it yet. But I have not heard of any of the other Northeast or Mid-Atlantic states that don't think they're going to be in compliance by January 1st. And New York actually has most of these in place already, including the corticosteroid and clenbuterol.
Okay.
But I've not heard anything about anyone saying we're not going to be there.
Okay.
Good. Anything else? We need a motion, right?
We need a motion.
Want to try it again, Commissioner?
Sure.
Actually, if I may just before you start, so the step with these now is these go to the legislature. These get filed with the Joint Committee on Economic Development as part of our statutory requirement that's unique to racing. So that would be the motion, is to forward them.
Well, don't, and if they don't take any action, then they're promulgated, right?
Yes, so I guess we do have to approve them.
Right.
Yep.
Right. So I'd move that we approve and adopt the changes to 205 CMR 3.29 and 4.52 in the form contained in the meeting materials, and authorize the Director of Racing to forward them to the legislature for appropriate action or inaction by the legislature.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it unanimously.
Thank you, Commissioners. That's all for racing today. Thank you again for your attendance yesterday.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director.
Thank you for your hard work.
Have a good long weekend.
And thank you.
Okay, we are back to Executive Director Day. I think on item 4B, the post-licensing critical path discussion / master schedule.
Yes, and Mr. Grossman is going to join me. I'm going to move over and see if it's any warmer in this spot over here. than it is.
Can you read that?
If I might, we'll begin the discussion with the licensing schedule, master schedule, just to identify updates which the commission has recently put in place. I think you have these in your packet as well. And the primary changes at this point is the commission moved from December 17th the award decision for the slot license to accommodate the evaluation process, and particularly the host community requirements, and move that from December 17th to January 10th. So that's been reflected on the schedule. In addition, we already spoke about the other change a little bit earlier today, was to extend the period for communities to petition the commission to be a surrounding community until the end of October this month. So that then in turn has extended that possible, if there's a disputed process, an arbitration process, would extend that out to approximately mid-February. At this point, we have not, I'm not recommending any changes to Category 1, but I'm sure the commissioners are aware there are several considerations to keep in mind as we move forward. Of course, one is the suitability process, and at this point we're still projecting the reasonableness that we have 11:30 as being able to complete that process. There's no reason to anticipate for sure that it won't be able to be completed by then, but there are some complexities, as I'm sure all of you are aware of. Also, the 12/31 application date for Category 1. There are a number of considerations, some which apply to the slots part of course, that the Commission will be keeping in mind as we move forward. Those, of course, are the pressure on the surrounding communities. We extended the evaluation process for slots for 30 days. Some consideration as to how that would look then as we move forward to the resort license consideration. And of course, the surrounding community's ability to petition. We extended that for slots as well. What would that look like then as we move forward for resort licenses? But we have are recommending or have made no changes to that portion of the schedule. there's no questions there, I will move on with the, Commissioners, I do have several notes, so to speak, on each one of these chart pages, and so at any point, if you wish to interrupt me or let me know that I'm going on too long, I can condense it up at any point that you want.
Just a quick question. The Region C background investigation, I'm just back on the schedule real briefly. Have we started that process?
Commissioner Zuniga, to tell you the truth, I do not know for sure. We've had the two applicants, and we're going to accept their applications, and I don't know whether or not that process has begun. So I will check on that.
I know there's been plenty on the plate of the IEB, but it would be a good thing to come
Yes.
back and check about it.
We'll check and advise.
I'm just wondering, since you raised that topic, whether what we're allowing for time on the calendar is, one, going to be sufficient, just considering our experience doing the suitability investigations on the other Class 1 applications.
Just glancing at it and based on last I knew, we only had two applicants. To me, it should be sufficient.
Okay.
Yep. Thank you.
Yes. That gets me to the section that starts with the summary master schedule again on the top, but has the, there we are. This is, to begin with, this is, to use the chairman's phrase, better turn it around and use the right end. This is really the critical path at a glance, which is right here, and in particular, if you're looking at your copy, you will notice that we have the different construction schedules projected out, but with that, you will see a line that goes across that I think could be classified as orange. And below that, there's a blue license, or a blue line that is licensing divisional, operational, and below that is administration. And the key to those is here is the construction timetables for the casino construction process and our organization development. We're designing the process to make sure we are fully operational when the casinos come online. And of course, before that, we have to have administrative processes and the licensing processes on to support those activities as we get forward. So that's the condensed version of the entire agency development processes in this top section. With that, let me step down, and this is the right now our timeline we're using for projections of really the time that the casinos may come online, the construction. The shortest one, of course, is in the corner, and I'll talk to you a little bit about that one question as we move forward that I think is very relevant to how we might move forward and what our timelines will be to develop the organization. We are still right now in a process where this is about a 26-month process for the construction of the casinos, the resort casinos themselves. So we were using these timelines as you'll see as you flow through the charts. Those two timelines will be extended through the rest of the organizational material that we'll take a look at. As we move forward, I'm hoping to engage the commission in a short discussion. What that would be is to basically look at the question of whether the commission would entertain a temporary facility that may have an effect to reduce the time to open, and of course it will make a significant difference, could make a significant difference on the planning. And it would be most helpful to know the commission's thoughts on this particular issue. The reason being is we look at the timetable and the concept that we're trying to develop the organization in. It's really simply put, just we want to be ready when the casinos are ready. I want to make sure that the organization is prepared to support its functions when the casinos are prepared to move forward with theirs.
And
With that,
just
excuse me.
I know where you're going, but I just want to be explicit about this, that On this chart, in my view, at the moment, the single most critical date is approval to open of the slots parlor on January 15th, 2015. And the question that we need to talk about, and you're getting there by way of the temporary facility, is that in fact the date off which everything else should drive, or is it earlier than that? So that everything essentially, and I'm oversimplifying slightly, but essentially everything else drives off that date. So that's the one that we need to focus on, and I know that's where you're going with the temporary facility question.
Correct, and this, right now, basically, it's at least been in discussion that the possible opening of a facility may take place right here, which is about 6 months from award date. With that, in interest of that discussion, Todd is here to help me out and actually talk about the requirements for approving and opening a facility, which I think might be helpful as well.
It's important to note here that the law does address this issue. It addresses it in slightly different respects for Category 1 and Category 2 facilities. It talks about this in both sections 10 and 11 of Chapter 23K and in Section 25. And Section 25 talks about the issuance by the Commission of an operations certificate. And the underlying theme of all of these statutes, as within most other areas of the regulation of gaming here in Massachusetts, is that there is a great deal of discretion that is afforded the Commission to make decisions as to, in this case, when a gaming facility can open. But there are certain requirements that must be in place by statute before the Commission can authorize the opening of an establishment. So as it pertains to the conversation today relative to a Category 2 operation, we look to Section 11 of the general laws. And it's important to understand that there are slight differences between the prerequisites for opening of a Category 2 facility versus a Category 1 facility, in that the Category 1 facility requirements are slightly more stringent. So with a Category 2 facility, the only prerequisite in Section 11 is that any infrastructure improvements necessary to increase visitor capacity and account for traffic mitigation shall be completed before the Category 2 licensee shall be authorized to operate slot machines. So that's the first prerequisite that the law sets in place.
The traffic mitigation.
Traffic mitigation. And that there's a similar requirement when it comes to Category 1s. It's worded slightly differently, but in essence, it's the same requirement, that the traffic mitigation has to be in place prior to any facility opening.
Temporary or otherwise. You draw that conclusion because it's silent. The statute is silent.
Absolutely. I think there is some talk somewhere, although I'm not certain where, about phasing. But these statutes don't use the term temporary or anything like that. They just talk about allowing a facility to operate. So when it comes to Category 2, that's the first Category 2 specific prerequisite. Then we would turn to Section 25, again, of Chapter 23K, where it talks about the issuance.
Chapter, what section?
23K, Section 25. First, paragraph A. It says, no gaming licensee shall conduct gaming without an operations certificate issued by the Commission. And then it goes on to identify 7 prerequisites that go into the issuance of an operations certificate. And I think it's important to note, of course, that as we go through the regulations drafting process, of course, if there are any other requirements, we can layer those in as well. But these are the 7 that are required by statute. And I'll go through them just really quickly, and we can certainly stop and focus on any that may be particular interest. But it talks about the implementation of all management controls required by the Commission, including controls on accounting, wagering, and auditing, so the internal control policies. Number 2, the implementation of all security precautions required by the Commission, again, getting back to the internal control procedures. Up-to-date listing of all gaming employees. And Part 4, which goes along with that, licensing or registration of all gaming employees. So that system has to be in place, and it has to, the establishment has to have gone through that whole licensing process. Number 5, the provision of office space at the establishment for use by the commission. 6, the hours of operation of the gaming establishment have to be provided, though I would note that this same section of the general laws provides that a gaming licensee may operate a gaming establishment from 6 a.m. to 5:59 a.m., though they do have to register their hours with the commission. So there's no requirement that they stay open all day, but that they can. So anyway, prior to being issued an operations certificate, they have to file their hours of operation with the commission. And finally, its personnel and procedures are efficient and they're prepared to entertain the public. So that's kind of a catch-all requirement. Section 25 also talks about, and these relate back to some of the prerequisites I just mentioned, but in paragraph D of Section 25, it requires a few other things. And it says that each applicant for a gaming license shall submit to the commission 3 things. And these 3 things have to be submitted at least 30 days before operations are scheduled to commence. The first is they have to provide a description of the minimum system of internal controls, and those will be governed by our regulations. They govern things, of course, such as the administration and accounting and wagering, simulcast wagering operations. Secondly, they have to provide a certification by the applicant's chief legal officer that the procedures conform with Chapter 23K and the Commission's regulations. And third, they have to provide a certification from the applicant's chief financial officer that the procedures provide adequate and effective controls. So those are the 3 things that are layered on top of having the procedures in place. So they have to have those, and they can't open until all the traffic mitigation issues have been completed to the commission's satisfaction. That, when you look at that in the view of whether a temporary facility would be permissible, I think the answer is that it is permissible. They just have to have a certain infrastructure, if you will, in place and meet certain guideposts as approved by the commission before they do so.
Thank you.
But we still have the discretionary call to make as to whether, notwithstanding statutory authority, we want to do it.
I think that's right, and that goes along with, this catch-all here that the personnel and procedures are efficient and prepared to entertain the public. We obviously have to have regulations in place that govern licensing and internal control procedures and things like that. So there is a lot of discretion built into this process, for sure.
So the question remains, from you to us, I guess, is will we consider temporary opening, obviously presuming that these conditions can be met?
That would be the question, yes.
Right. So what do you think?
I think we should consider it. I think it would be really important, though, that from a building and site perspective, that the temporary facility is up to the standards that we would require, so that it doesn't look like something we wouldn't be proud to have open. I mean, it would be the first impression of gaming, casino gaming. So I think that would be important. But I think I don't see a reason that we should rule it out. Just arbitrarily.
I don't either, but I thought, and maybe I was awake for this one, we talked about getting some data from other jurisdictions that had done this.
Yes.
Because the one thing that concerns me is how do you enforce the temporary part of the temporary casino. I mean, you could say you can open this, you can run this for 6 months, but then you're gonna shut it down if they don't do it, if they don't have the permanent facility up and running after 6 months? Maybe you do, and just, it's their bed, but that has implications as well in terms of anticipated revenues and people counting on revenues. We just need another month and we'll get going.
What other jurisdictions have done is impose significant fines for not meeting deadlines. Significant fines, so that there's all the incentive to meet those deadlines for opening.
And in that process, as we move on here, we'll talk a little bit about the construction or project monitoring phase a little bit, and hopefully a little bit about the commission's thoughts on that. But it would seem that would be an appropriate spot, is to be able to have some control over that with inspections of records and progress and timelines that the contractors or the project is committed to. Bring that information to the commission, and then if it took it could take, in theory, I think, if it was a requirement that was conditional with a license, could take up to a removal, license revocation, suspension if they actually didn't move forward. There would be impacts, though, obviously.
One thing that I also think it gets back to the commission in a way. Certainly, a couple of these principles that are outlined in the statute, just in terms of sequence and duration. If I was planning the critical path, it would occur to me that the licensing and registration requirement, as well as the regulations that will govern certain of the things that are mentioned specifically in the statute, have to be certainly in place, and we drive some of those activities. So it's I would agree that we need to be open, and how could we not dismiss the idea only on its face value, but it does come back to us to some degree as to how as to whether certain milestones can be achieved in certain durations.
Well, and that, part of the discussion from my perspective is that it's a little bit temporary. Doesn't necessarily mean specify how temporary, how long the project would take. Would it take 10 months? Would it 6 months? It depends on what actually happened during the construction. So from my perspective, one of the hardest things is trying to time the development of the organization, whether it be regulations, hiring, to accommodate that kind of unknown that quick. We have the slots part of it already faster, which is going to require us to bring up a portion of the organization without too much of the organization. So we've got people that aren't essentially nothing to do until the casino's open. So we've already got a bifurcated process. So this would actually introduce a sort of a third spot, which I'm guessing probably the solidest way we'd have to plan for the shortest reasonable time frame for that facility to open. Right. Which would go along with the regulations and the hiring and those kind of things that we would plan to have ready in that 6 months, whether or not it actually happened or not. At least that's my thoughts.
I think you said that exactly right, and that's exactly why we're having this conversation. And what I'm hearing so far is that there's a consensus, at least on this side of the table, that we should not preclude a temporary facility, and that we then should. And there are a number.
Left wing is there too.
Left wing, right. So
there's consensus on these sides.
Consensus on the right wing as well? Yeah. On the far right wing, do you agree too?
Absolutely.
Mr. Far
now
right
I know
wing?
why I sit over here. Okay.
Okay, so I think, there are clearly going to be any number of conditions, some of which have already been mentioned, and any number of considerations. But what you're hearing, I think, is that yes, we would consider a temporary facility. We know we have, I can remember off the top of my head, one of the bidders has already proposed that, talked about opening 6 months. If that is for real and we would consider it, then we'd be talking as soon as July 10th, not January 15th. So I think the next question is, okay, if we're going to consider it, what does that do? So what is the earliest reasonable date? Because that's the date, repeating what I said, to which we have to trigger everything else, tie everything else.
Well, I think it's incumbent on, and I'll do a little bit more of that, try to use that date not from the evaluation process, but use the proposal a little bit to see what the reasonable date attached to that might be. And then, from my perspective, what we'll have to do is consolidate in planning stage at this point toward that date.
Right.
I don't know how else that we'd actually be able to do it. 'Cause we couldn't start we really can't wait for the evaluation process to go through because we'll be losing 2 months. of that
No,
process.
absolutely. That, again, that's why we're having the conversation today.
You
Right.
know,
So that would be my intentions, is to spend a little bit more time looking at the realistic nature of what that date might be, but then adjusting these schedules in order to make sure that we can accommodate.
It is conceivable that the arbitration process for the surrounding community, would happen to at least, say, one of our applicants. And if that's the case, I wonder if by the fact that we will have to move our decision on our licensing decision until those negotiations are concluded. I don't know that that's
Well, we'll know that
necessary.
on the 31st.
No,
Not necessarily.
we'll know that.
Well, we'll know if we have any,
We'll know if we have any
correct,
open debates, right? But we won't know
Correct.
how long they're going to take.
right.
Correct.
You know,
For 30 days.
Anyway, right. So, so I think that absolutely could be. I mean, I do think realistically, I think chances are pretty good that as a practical matter, when all is said and done, January 2015 isn't that far off. The real world that the operators are going to be involved in, all the exigencies that come up, the
Permitting.
significant possibility of delays from surrounding communities, permitting, et cetera. However, I don't think that's what we can hang our hat on. So I think, and I think we could study this to death, and it's just going to be, forgive the expression, a crapshoot. So I would intuitively, in my mind, 8 months from the 10th of January could happen. That could happen. Anything much before that is probably pushing it. So maybe I'm wrong, but from my standpoint, I'd say let's make it 8 months, and we got to be ready to go by 8 months, and just get going, and don't study it anymore. Just put a stake in the ground. That's what we're going for.
8 months from now?
No, 8 months from the 10th. 8th month
January.
from the decision date, which would be 8 months from January 10th.
Earliest decision.
But that's just me speaking. I mean, but it's me speaking from a lot of years of getting things going in my life, so, but whatever date you pick, I would say this is not a matter of science at all. This is art at best. And let's just pick one and get ready for that date. We'll have to agree with you. Sounds like you're thinking maybe
Well,
something different from that, but.
I think we should be ready if we approve an operator and whatever their time frame is, I think we should be ready then. I don't think we should be the ones holding up a project.
No, we're totally agreeing on that.
So I don't think I'm not sure how saying 8 months is our guess, and if an operator says 6, how we necessarily align those two. So that was my only thought, is that I think it's important that we're prepared, and I know we can be.
Yeah. Well, so you hear, but it sounds like somewhere between 6 to 8, is what the commissioners would feel comfortable with. And I agree with Commissioner Cameron with the principle of we got to be ready when they're ready is one we all agree to, no question about that. So you're just in the unpleasant situation of having to just come up with something and make it happen. So, make your informed judgment in the next few days or next week and let us know, and if we agree, then you're off to the races.
We'll should have that by mid-next week.
But any
or
way
so.
you cut it, whatever date it is, it's gonna put pressure on the deadlines that are in the master schedule now, obviously.
Correct.
And so, you know, I think we're better focusing our energies on starting to squeeze those timeframes rather than worrying too much about which of, is it gonna be 6, 7, 8, or 9, you know?
Great. With that, I'll just take you really quick through some of the, some of the steps we've got, because it does give then a little better perspective of all those different things that will be impacted. For one, if we have to move a lot quicker. No, I'll just start with the, I'm not gonna go into the problem gambling section, or not problem gambling, research agenda is the next part I'll just touch on briefly and not very extensively, other than for those, the baseline survey is on schedule, and I think the commission probably knows we're moving forward with a recommendation on the cohort study. From this aspect, it looks like the baseline study is due to be March, out of the field March 5th. So it should not have any interference with the slot parlor actually opening earlier, 6 months early, as far as I can tell. Chairman Crosby, I don't know if you would have a different
No,
take
I
on
agree.
that, but that's what it looks like.
I mean, I think the researchers would prefer in an absolutely perfect world that the license not have been awarded yet. We can't do that on the slots, but we'll make everything else.
The next section down, we haven't talked too much about, but I do want to touch base with the commission briefly here this afternoon. And because one thing to keep, as we looked at those requirements for a certificate of operation, a lot of those basically are the kind of concept that goes into a final pre-operational inspection, would go into that by pre-operational inspection by the agency in order to report to the commission whether or not the operation was ready to open, had completed the requirements of statute, and what other regulations we put in place. So what we've got here is we just started a real rough draft at the concept of construction or project management of the casino or the slots part. And one of the first steps is, at this point, the commission doesn't, internal to the commission, really have the skills to monitor that construction and that progress as we move forward. And this isn't for building codes and those kind of things, but it would be for deliverables during the process, gauging of how much is invested and how far they've got down, how they're doing towards their timetable to open, all of which is critical to their plans, the development of the surrounding community agreements, or excuse me, have they met the terms of their commitments? And so what we would need to do if we were anticipating, and I have heard a lot of discussion that we thought we should do some monitoring of that progress, excuse me, would be to proceed with a procurement for that kind of expertise. And we're projecting here, we really need to get started on that fairly soon, probably early next month, in order to have that ready to go when the construction started. I think one of the interesting things that we can't gauge is that winter time, how much project or how much progress can really be made. But as soon as they're ready, we do want to have the ability to move forward with that monitoring process if it's something the commission wanted to undertake. Along with that, we'd also probably have to devise a set of regulations that would support that process and ultimately the final inspection and approval.
The building and site design contract for the slots has in it a provision for construction supervision. And the second procurement, that's for the slots part. The second procurement for the Category 1 facility is closed now, Bruce? And I think that procurement had in it a provision for, if requested, providing construction supervision services. So it might be worthwhile to think about that rather than a separate procurement. And I say that not only because it's there and it would speed things up, but also because it might be worthwhile to, and more efficient, to have somebody who participated in the evaluation process then jump over into the supervision process. I just throw that out as a consideration.
No, and that's a possibility, and I think if it's, what I understand is we could use some of those we've already
Right.
recruited. There is, of course, a possibility, we could also tap the project manager if we felt that the current project coordinator's firm, I think, because I think that was in that procurement as well. So that would be a more expedient part. In my mind, I was kind of thinking it might be cleanest to go for a focus, and those groups could put back in if they wanted for a specific task of monitoring the construction. Instead of, it might be harder to actually make choices from those we have on, we already have online. But I'm comfortable with either way. The bottom line is discussion. Is that something that we should move forward and try to come up with a clear recommendation plan for us to move forward? Excuse me.
I don't see, it seems to me that's going to be essential. We've got to keep track of this, and we've also got to keep track of the conditions, and the conditions are going to be complex and require somebody who knows what they're talking about, even if we simply incorporate what they've said they're going to do in the application in our license. There's a lot of complexity in there, and we're going to need somebody who knows what they're talking about to look at and see whether they've got the right diesel generator. I guess not diesel generator.
Well, this is, go ahead, you're more about
Well,
this.
yeah, I think the oversight function is critical, and I think there's a number of things on the deliverables, but also I believe there's a real role for design review as these projects progress. That it's important that we have that expertise on the ground, periodically reporting back to us. I would argue in favor of conducting another procurement. I think the cost to us is small, and I think we could elicit. We have the flexibility to extend contracts, which is always there. But I think if we phrased it a little bit different from the procurements that we did for our evaluators, with an emphasis on a term of the industry, which is owners, project managers. There's many firms that do an owner's project manager role, which I would term is really what we're talking about. Not necessarily construction monitoring, but a larger project monitoring. We may get really good responses. We could always decide not to act on them and extend current contracts if we need to, but I think we will be well served by just having a procurement with that specificity.
I leave it to you. It's up to you. But the one thing I do think is we need to be really thoughtful about what the role is here. Do we want to be checking whether they've got the right diesel engine, and that the right joists, and that or at the very high end, is it all we care about is are they on time? I mean, there's somewhere on that continuum, and you could spend an infinite amount of money double checking everything. So trying to narrow the scope to a really meaningful strategic oversight role is to me very important. And I don't exactly know what that is. I wouldn't know how to draft that, but I'm sure plenty of people do. You know more about this than I do, but being clear about what we want the oversight to be and not just wasting a lot of money is important.
And I think drafting an RFQ or RFP to that effect would really help us.
Well, I agree.
If because we'll see something in writing, we'll share thoughts,
Yeah.
and it's an exercise. It's like drafting a job description
Right.
before hiring somebody. what do we want them to do? And maybe we've done that, you know, to be fair. Maybe there's enough expertise there. But
No, I think you're right. I think you're right, because unlike some of our other things, we could bring that one back and talk about it among this group to really help us get our heads around what we want this person to do and what we want what our expectations are, so that we don't duplicate things.
Right.
There will be an owner's project manager.
Well,
I think that'd be a good idea.
Well, there may be a role here too for regulations, I think, that would actually help describe what the commission intentions or the direction of the commission through that entire process. So, we do have, it comes to mind two for sure, and maybe three possibilities of consultants that we currently work with. So it kind of comes back to that, what would be the fairest way even to come to a decision between those various groups as well.
Right.
So.
we would get better quotes as well in terms of what the job is perceived to be by conducting procurement.
Well, I will work with my compatriot over here on the regulation side in particular and see if there's something that should be proposed. And then am I hearing at this point to probably move forward with a procurement for that service?
Yeah.
It'll have to be a pretty quick one.
Got a short bar in my little graph. Real quickly, the next section I have is relative, at the top left-hand corner, if you're looking at the same one I am, it has the evaluation process in there. Everybody's pretty familiar with that at this point, so I'm not going to go into detail. But before I start in the other part of the section, I did want to refer you to there's an organization chart, and this is primarily designed to be, should be in your packet, I don't know if you saw it. But what it is to briefly give me an opportunity to talk with the commissioners, not about the detail in the chart or the level below, really the director level, but just to hit on real quick the division level unit, or the major unit levels in the commission that I see at this point, and make sure that you don't want me to go in a different direction.
Which tab, is this a tab?
It's a tab.
Is it on the,
It's under.
it's on this chart?
I'm sorry, you're looking at this, right?
This, okay.
Yeah, it's the last one before C on your, it's the last part of B.
Last part
If you
of,
go to C and just
Right, it's
flip
4B.
one forward.
It's right
Go to
after
C
the
and just
resumes.
flip forward. Go to C and just one forward.
got it. Thank you, Colonel.
So what I would like to refer you to is just to these major pieces of the organization and make sure that you're comfortable with them.
Last page.
I'll wait for it.
Okay.
Different four.
Took me a little bit to find it before too. It's behind the resume, so
It's nice that we're all on the same page.
well, we'll see how close we are to that. So what I've described here, and primarily I just want to hit those large units, I guess. So let me, and there is some method to this madness that really fits all on this one page, so that has something to do with it as well. I don't think, it will not be the overall design of an organizational chart as we move forward. So obviously the commission executive assistants, and I would like just to mention briefly, talk to this generally with Janice Riley, but would be the plan under this. You see executive assistants too, but we had actually planned to move the commissioner's reception position as well to Janice's supervision as chief of staff. It makes a lot of sense to make sure that direct supervision is there. So if you continue down with me on the left, these aren't there'll probably be divisions that we're talking about. So I've got mostly just the kind of the name of the director in the place. General counsel, general counsel, of course, would be the deputy counsel, the legal services side, and of course the hearings
examiner would also be within the general counsel's office. To the right are what's been termed oftentimes the external affairs, the ombudsman, director of communication, research and problem gambling, workforce or supplier and development. Then below that, we've got the director of horse racing, the horse racing division on the far left. Then we have IAB, the IAB director. Under the IAB director, there's a little error in the far left. It says assistant director. That'd actually be captain MSP, who would be responsible for field enforcement here and background investigation. Likely another assistant director who would be responsible for financial investigations. That unit would be sort of a general purpose unit that would be responsible for specific audits at the casinos themselves as time wore on, but also would be responsible for financial investigations necessary to support the licensing operation. In addition, the next major unit with the IAB director would be probably assistant director, but it would be the gaming agent section as well.
So that's an additional assistant director that was not on previous TOs, is that correct?
We termed them something else, I think, but I think we had supervisors there before, but it seems like to me that it may make the sense with the captain, the two assistant directors of the other major units would probably give us a better competitive advantage as we start trying to recruit for some experience for these areas. We've got the licensing unit would be the next one, and we've got the major portions of the licensing unit set. Have some more specialists that have to come in as we move. Licensing specialists as we move forward. The next point is the CIO. Of course, that will ultimately probably be technical division, something to that extent. But under that will be the support, the computer support section, programmers if we need them, help, those kind of things, the standard things that we know of with our computer operation, and then also a technical gaming section. And I'll pause one right there, because that's also one of the policy areas that we'll be looking at as we move forward. What would be the best, should the commission have standards for electronic gaming equipment? If the commission has standards, should it have an approval process? If it has an approval process, there's a wide range of possibilities, everything from a contract monitor that's just dedicated toward monitoring of a private organization that does the testing and approval, all the way to a full lab, which is also the possibility of a concept. I haven't been too shy about saying I'm actually in between. To me, it's really critical as we look forward to the actual gaming. We're probably talking about 90, maybe plus percentage of the revenue that comes from gaming will come from machines and equipment. I don't think anybody's prepared to argue that electronic gaming probably will continue to have at least as much role and may have more role. And as internet gaming comes forward, it will be more and more complex. To me, we're really, in the interest of the commission, its ability to actually regulate, be able to talk intelligently with both the manufacturers on site, be able to regulate the equipment on site as well. It makes sense to have a significant form of expertise. At least from my perspective, it would be in the commission and the state's interest in the long term to have really a combination, leverage that knowledge with the private agency to certify that the equipment meets the commission standards, but have a technical group that is fully capable of understanding and probably moving forward with some approval relative to specific requirements that Massachusetts makes. So as we move forward, I'm looking at I'm thinking a combination, but this is one of the things too I'll be asking our new CIO will start working on immediately to prepare a presentation for the commission.
Okay, so so you would say, because there's not a lot of time to set up that kind of a system, so you would say we're going to have that topic before us when?
The exact date we're going to have it, I've got to talk to him first.
Give or take, I
But
mean-
I'd like to get that up this fall, or later this fall, early December if I can.
Yeah, it seemed to me like end of November almost.
Yeah.
Sometime within a month or so, that decision needs to get made.
Is the one thing about the slot parlor, from the aspect of just the 1,250 slots at the slot parlor, I think it's also very possible to handle that through a private testing and come up with, not have to have the entire structure if we would approve it in place by then. So I'm looking more at, as we get into the full casino operation with probably 10,000 machines, we would have, actually, at that point, we'd be prepared to move forward. Plus, we'd be in a new location. I just wanted to make a quick pitch about what I was up to in that area as we were going forward, because I know there's been a lot of discussion around it on the other side.
Can I mention just one thing? I think in my mind, I equate it to having an internal audit function and operating with outside auditors. An organization should not wholesale delegate, an audit function to an outside party. But there are efficiencies to using experts that can do these sort of thing, well, efficiently. So I take your point about the combination, but I'd really also look forward to just what that may mean on a more granular level in terms of cost and FTEs and things like that.
And I look forward to talking about it with the commission in more detail, because I think it is an extremely important decision
Critical.
amongst many for the commission. Then the other major unit, of course, would be the business unit, probably, but I've listed here as the CFAO, Human Resources, Budget, Revenue, and Accounts Payable under that section. So
Where does the real-time financial monitoring of the facilities come in
to
to
be
our office?
under the CFAO,
Under the CFAO,
Yes.
okay. So,
hence
is that?
revenue.
Oh, that's revenue, okay.
Revenue.
Got it, okay.
So the concept basically here is that we will have field regulatory staff. I'm just estimate probably about 10 per casino. Slots parlor will be slightly less than that. There'll be MSP staff at the casinos as well. The headquarters staff the financial investigations unit in particular will have the ability then to audit specific sections of the casino, which allows us the flexibility to sort of check the checkers to make sure that there's a neutral review of that, and the actual revenue monitoring will be with the CFAO and the business unit, which will actually give that separation again.
Right. Okay.
So that's basically, like I said, obviously the horse racing in particular, there's 25 people. This chart isn't intended to describe at that level. But this is how far kind of the direction I'm going at this point. I wanted to check in. As you move forward, let me know at any time whether you have a difference of opinion or want me to go in a different direction. I'll do that.
No, I mean, on the face, I mean, it looks straightforward. It looks fine to me. I mean, for a presumptive starting point, sure.
Okay. Thank you. That brings me to the back to the little chart, which is growing steadily larger. So one thing that we will have to do, if you look up at the top, there's the planned opening of the slot parlor. So that date will actually have to be moved back to the left. If we, for instance, we're going to use July 14 or somewhere in that area, so we can kind of see how that's going to impact some of these tasks. I'm just going to go quickly through them here. If the commissioners want to stop and discuss any of them, just let me know, and we can. Otherwise I'll refer them. I know we're getting late in the day. So right at the top, this is IEB. We have the first agreement we're trying to negotiate is a memorandum of agreement with MSP, and this is for law enforcement staff essentially. With that, you see the line coming out to the right, which essentially describing the academy training process, in-service training process, and the gambling regulatory training process. And so what really happens here is we train new state policemen that are essentially then backfilled as more experienced positions come to the commission. As you can see, that's a process we don't control. So if we open a slots casino earlier, we will have to find a way to accommodate that. And one possibility would be to be able to utilize some of our staff that's at headquarters in some capacity. So there are some ways that we can come up with something temporarily, I think. But a little bit more complex. Obviously, union agreements and those kind of things will have to be considered. So that isn't quite as easy. You'll see as we move forward, we've also, in the process, we were in planning, we were thinking we wanted to get the MSP agreement finished and done first. We wanted to proceed ahead then with the agreement with the Attorney General's office, the Liquor Commission. As you see in the middle, we've got essentially 3 different agreements at local law enforcement. Talks about the commission facilitating that process. I'm going to move down a little bit, and in the center, you'll talk about its draft policy for our enforcement and regulatory units. Draft example of a regulatory policy may be the concept of options for enforcement, which may run everything from written letter of warning all the way through actual administrative action, suspension, and those kind of things. What we'll be talking about here in the middle is actually training. It has a regulatory in there, but it's actually gambling training for probably both MSP and our gaming agents, particularly in the case now we're going to have to get people out to the slot parlor quicker than we had anticipated. Then you see in the middle of the chart, we got financial assistant director starting. We are in the process already with our new human resource office of designing position descriptions for both of those positions, the gaming, the financial investigation assistant director and the gaming agent assistant director here.
Is that the financial investigations supervisor was scheduled for on the one I'm looking at least, was 10/17, which we're not going to make, obviously.
That's our start. That higher line there.
Oh, that's the start?
That's the, the position description development, recruitment, and those kind of things. We are looking at about 115.
So the first deputy to Director Wells would start January 15th?
That's what we hope. Yes.
And up above, the background investigation unit is meant to be ready by 12/3.
Right, and most of that unit is already in place.
So we'll be using our own state police?
Yes, they will.
For that?
Yes.
Okay. And that is presumably on somewhere around 1/11, the 11th of January, we're going to start getting flooded with applications for background checks for contractors and all kinds of vendors and people. Are we going to have the capacity to hit that? That could, I mean, I would think that could comes in tens and dozens right up front.
We will, what we're projecting out here is actually licensing we'll get to that there on one of these flip sides. But we do, to answer the question, we anticipate, that's why I'm gaining in my intensity of making sure we get those draft regulations before the commission at the end of the month. The plan is to actually have them effective in the regulations effective in early January, to have the database online at least to the ability of gaming vendors and registrants in that same time period. We're, with the delay in award, we're anticipating that may end up coming about early first week in February or something. We were previously planning for January. But, it'll be right after that date. The complexity again will be that early date, because if we're starting to look at July, what we'll have to be doing as well, you might, down at the bottom, I've got this kind of concept of regulation packages that I think we need to move forward. But what we'll need to do is actually the package for slot machine standards and approval process. We will need to move that up significantly in order to make sure we're prepared when the slot parlor needs to order its equipment. So that is going to be an additional, it's going to be a little additional challenge. And the other part of that will be as well on the licensing side. We'll need to begin licensing fairly immediately manufacturers and vendors of equipment, all kinds of gaming equipment, so they're prepared as well. So that's going to be a little twist that I can't say that I necessarily have in here, but it will have to be incorporated.
And you alluded to this, but you know, some of the policy decisions that we have also depends on what level of background investigation is done on key licensees, key employees, other employees, and then registrants,
Correct.
Which will constitute the bulk of some of those individuals.
Yeah. So what I would like to touch base with the commission is kind of right. It's kind of demonstrated a little bit at the bottom of HIB chart, and what it is a series of regulations. So what I'm proposing is that we move forward under the concept. Right at the last line, you should see something that says surveillance, internal control, slot machine approval, casino surveillance, internal control, and last time table games. So what I'd like to be able to move forward with is really to the commission a package rule concept that's designed really around the operation of the casinos and what regulations the commission has to have online in order to follow through. An example of that is we've got to have the licensing regulations up, so that's a package. We've got to have them ready to go. So we started with some policy decisions as well relative to that package. I'd like to be able to move forward on a basic concept along that same lines, not to mean being so rigid that we wouldn't incorporate other factors, or if it demonstrated itself, perhaps take an entire unit. But I want to make sure when we have this shortage of time is that we're trying to isolate it as to the topic that we for sure need to be done by a given date. So it's just a little bit different twist, but it just goes to that concept of trying to be ready when casinos are ready.
But who is drafting the surveillance, the cash controls, cage management, casino audits? Who's drafting all that stuff?
Well, right now, this gentleman next to me is doing licensing by the most part in conjunction with David Acosta and his team. And I actually, when we look at briefly, if we have time to look at the assignments, but the concept would be the same, is to assign a subject matter expert, which would be the person that's really going to be in charge of enforcing those particular regulations, as my responsible party, as needing to collect the information and move forward. And then in turn, Catherine will assign a person from her office that will actually work with that individual from the legal side to make sure we move forward with those regulations.
So we don't have the subject matter expert for those functions yet, right?
This is going to be a little problem because the subject matter expert at this point is tied up doing suitability investigations. So we don't have the two assistant directors, and so between Karen and I, we're going to have to fulfill that role as best we can.
But what about our existing consultants? I mean, they did the heavy drafting in the early phase when there was no staff here had to be they, because none of us knew half the stuff we were talking about anyway. So are you planning on using, so are you planning on using them to do a lot of the internal?
Answer to that question is yes.
Okay.
The concept is, and Todd can whack me or something if I'm going the wrong, but the basic concept is to use the consultants to gather essentially examples from specific jurisdictions,
right,
and then formulate those. From there, though, we'll have more direct involvement in the redrafting and the selection of which move forward to the commission.
And some of these also,
Yeah, I can.
I'm sorry, some of these also depends on the approach that we take to certain, to certain of these specific topics. there's examples in other jurisdictions where internal controls, for example, can be very prescriptive, or on the other end of the spectrum can be principles where minimum standards that then the operators submit their internal control plan, and the commission may approve or modify. So depending on the approach, I would argue the duration and the resources of that effort could vary to some degree.
Yeah. Yes, matter of fact, I think that's a key issue for the commission as we move forward, is that the concept, on the one hand, the commission can take an approach with internal controls that we specifically describe the detail, cashier's cage, how many people have to be employed, how they process copies of documents, how many copies of documents, those kind of things. Or the commission could basically say something similar. You have to have a cashier's cage, and you have to describe the minimum procedures you'll have. The commission will approve it, and then in effect we enforce their internal controls if we approve them.
But in either case, aren't we going to need somebody who knows what they're doing? That how this stuff's supposed to work, but there's a lot here that's pretty sophisticated stuff, and on just for an enforcement basis, aren't we going to need somebody who's familiar with this and familiar with how cages work and can pick up the nuances of things like that to oversee an enforcement operation?
Yes, I mean, let me qualify that. I think we can, as we're drafting them up, between our consultants and staff we have, I think we can move forward at regulations that are pretty effective. As we start in the process, as we get down the road, it will be easier if we're able to recruit regulatory staff for those two positions at least that are familiar with it.
The deputy directors.
The two deputy directors.
Right.
Yeah, that will be helpful. If that's not the case, we'll just have to train up.
Which deputy directors?
The two assistant directors for
IDB.
IAB,
Under IAB.
financial, and particularly the gaming agents.
And those searches are starting basically now.
The financial one's starting now. The gaming agent will follow right behind.
Okay. Well, I share Judge McHugh's concern about that. I mean, I don't know. It seemed to me we ought to start those both searches at the same time. There's that. Maybe this is something that you, who knows something about this, and Director Acosta knows more, have reason not to share the anxiety that we have. But
And I know
since
our state police has
know-
already attended many training sessions. They've been out there working with other agencies to see how they do it in other places. So they're already starting their training, and they have been for several months now. So I actually have faith that between experience and training, we'll be able to do this job well.
Well, we do have the advantage of being able to tap all the existing regulations for other states that are
Right,
already in
which is
business.
huge,
So
right.
that's gonna be extremely helpful. And then one of the challenge that I see is we want, and I think I've got that message on it, to be a Massachusetts system that is wanted to be modern and effective and not overly cost burden on the licensees as well. We want it to be a progressive system, relies heavily on automation. So I think as we collect in that information, that's going to be one of the things we'll want to look at, is we just don't want to enact some other regulations. We want to make sure they fit the operation we envision today. And I think even some of the earlier discussion is a lot of the regulations around the country look like Nevada and New Jersey. That doesn't necessarily mean at this point especially that Nevada and New Jersey models are what should be here in Massachusetts, but there'll be a lot of information from that will be helpful.
And I'm less concerned, I don't want to prolong this, I'm less concerned about drafting the regulations than I am about actually enforcing it. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's going on out there, and and knowing what to look for and how to watch and whether the regulations are actually being followed. I don't think you just, anyway, that's my concern.
And I think one thing that is clear, and is from my experience as well, is whatever licensees the commission selects, they will form a key part in helping the agency prepare to move forward with regulation as well. That doesn't mean we'll be doing what the licensees say, but just like any other business regulation outfit, they're very experienced in games and regulation. We will train the staff, but this isn't some kind of a
Right, no, I understand.
this kind of
I
operation.
understand.
It is an ability to rely on that kind of expertise to help move our staff forward.
Yeah, I agree with that, sort of in general, but we have to have a couple of, 2 or 3 people that really know this stuff.
We're going to go after them, but Mr. Chairman, I'm sure we will prepare for not being able to lure as well if we're not successful in luring people away. I think we can train up for it. So.
Can I just say, sorry. I know what you mean, Mr. Chairman, but you know, some of this stuff is not rocket science. You know, there are, it's a lot about procedures, it's a lot about compliance. You know, we have some expertise, we'll continue to acquire that, we'll rely on our consultants, but I think that there's a lot that's out there that's also common sense, and we'll continue to work towards that.
I feel comfortable. I'm going to work awful hard at getting some experienced regulators in here, but on the other hand, I'm confident that we can move forward and be ready.
Let's start on both of them then.
I wrote that down. We will start.
Okay.
We are basically started. It's just when we were going to advertise them.
Okay.
So that's IAB. Should I continue or?
Yeah, I'm afraid so.
How are we, do we have,
I'm only fulfilling my obligation.
Yeah.
do we have much to go? I may need to ask for a break if we,
No, let's take a,
Do you want to take a break?
I mean, I'd like to finish this conversation. This is one that I think is very important, and I'm as beat as anybody, but let's try to make it 5 minutes, come right back, and then race through the rest of this.
Okay, and I think I can go, the IAB section is particularly
It's
complex.
right, I mean, that is the guts of it.
I think I can go through, because we've already hit licensing, and everybody, we're already on the way there.
So let's try to come back in 5 minutes.
All right?
Okay, I think we are ready to reconvene and drive to the finish.
I will begin to move faster here, and so once again, interrupt me if I'm licensing. We've already had some discussions on at this point, so I just want to, and I have acknowledged this anyway, but I want to make sure I do. Our licensing division did complete its first official task with the administrative processing of Category 2. So obviously we plan to debrief how that went, but what it does is helps us now to continue to put our licensing unit more into that role that they will be assuming as we move forward. So,
Excuse me, Rick, side issue, not exactly critical path, but one of the things we've sort of made reference to time after time after time is the issue of Corey, drug, and credit checking in our process for various levels of employees. We've never sat down and had a policy discussion about, you know, what standards are we going to use, you know, how are we going to try to keep that from blocking our ability to have hired some of the people that we want to have hired. So that needs to get on something I've talked about with Jill. Everybody's aware of it, but we've got to really focus on it, try to figure out what, if anything, we can do about that.
and we have, with MSP coming in on our backgrounds in-house, we've resolved a lot of peripheral issues.
I didn't mean the processing of it. I didn't mean the time sink. I meant the substance of, you know, are we going to kick people out? What level of Corey problem, credit problem, drug problem are we going to kick people out? Are we going to have cure times, you know, et cetera? I meant the policy of it, not the processing.
From staff or from applicants?
No, that we're gonna hold. What standards are we going to hold the applicants to?
The applicants,
and the people they hire.
Okay.
Yeah. Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry, that was
licensees,
right?
individuals too, and registrants.
Right. All the way down to registrants. You know.
Okay.
It's one of the policy questions.
Is it already one?
Yeah, it's on the list.
Oh, all right, so
It
Enrique
is.
is saying it's on the list. Okay, good.
Okay, let me just quick run down the rest of this so you kind of know what we're up to. So part of what we're doing is preparing for the Category 1 applications to be received on the 31st. We've got a process to develop regulations. This list here is about mid-December, but what we're trying to do is get the effective date of those regulations in early January, somewhere before the 10th. We're going to have to do a little bit of staff addition. You see it there in the next spot. We are developing applications as we speak. At this point, we have drafts in process. We've got to coordinate procuring the fingerprint equipment, have that in place, and have to determine how between MSP and licensing that system will work. Background check system, which is something that, of course, we've already got somewhat in process. At the bottom is really one of the most significant things, and this is the database, obtaining the database. And I know there were demonstrations yesterday at the commission. I was fortunate we had our CIO there, so I think we've got a productive solution, but that still looks like we're going to move forward.
You're talking about the document management system?
No. Excuse me? No.
License.
No, well, we've verified that the selection of the document management, what would be the preferred, or the selected document management system is supported. The CIO endorsed that as well, but also this is the licensing system here. That position is going to be very busy because we've got a number of things on the plate for automation. I'm going to move. Come back.
On the registrant and the applications for gaming vendors, aren't we likely to get that begins on 2/14? Aren't we likely to get them if we award the license the next day? I mean, that's the construction crews, and it's only it's a month difference, but
We didn't. It's possible we didn't anticipate it, but I think we'll be ready in mid-January to accept them anyway.
all right.
We'll just change that on the form.
It's going to be a short holiday season.
Yeah. For Rick.
Anything else on licensing? Okay. Let me go through administration here real quickly, and I believe in plugs, but as you know, we've remodeled the upstairs. We're in process. We have a team on our new office location to be able to visit those, narrow that selection down to probably at least a priority ranking, if not the top 3 for commissioners to consider for selection of new office location. And why I'm at it, I'm going to pause boldly as far as the office renovation. I need to thank profusely Janice Riley and Bill Curtis and Mary Ann Dooley. There's other folks that had the computers and everything running, but a lot of people that were involved, but they definitely played the key role.
Great, thank you.
And so I'm going to jump over here real quick. And I've already had an opportunity to discuss this list with our human resources manager in many cases, but I'm going to run down the things we need for our infrastructure that are going to be in process. I'll be meeting with her to verify exactly the schedule will move forward. But what we've got here at the top, first we want to have finish up work on policies. We want to get our hiring processes in place. We do have employee background, personal data system, record system we want up and running. We'll have employee IDs, job classes we need to develop and have in place. In addition, we're going to move forward with the goals and objectives, an accountability system, which will start actually, get an earlier start in that, probably around December of this year. Eventually, of course, we want to blend that accountability system into the other two, which talks about performance management as we get through. And that focus, the performance management focus, will begin in the spring, but we want to get an evaluation system in earlier. Down at the bottom, and we've just talked about this a little bit, but with the Chief Information Officer, I'll be hitting with them that in more detail. But just a quick viewpoint is we've got a number of key systems. We've got the document management system, the licensing system, the tax, financial, the audit and accounting system that'll have to be in, plus building the technical unit and the electronic gaming technical unit. So that's
Up above that is install surveillance remote capacity. Is that,
this is what it, and on this cuts, evaluate the surveillance remote capacity, change it. So it's to look at whether or not that
Whether
will
we
be,
want- okay.
whether we're going to do that.
okay.
And anything that I'm thinking, we had a little bit of discussion this briefly at a commission meeting, but surveillance is digital just like everything else at this point. So I want to make sure as we move forward, there's not a role for actually having that surveillance remotely, whether it's headquarters or at on-site locations. I want to see where it will actually serve our staff the best. And then Chief Financial Officer, that's, I'm definitely, as Derek gets on board, we're going to be able to draw on his knowledge in a lot of cases as well for things that we need to develop. But that's where the financial requirements will eventually come from, and the automated system for monitoring machines and accounting. And in the process, horse racing is on the reverse side. We've just taken a couple of shots at this, but basically you can see some of the steps, the rules that we passed today, the report, but we also have a transition of the licensing system from horse racing. We are anticipating next, basically 2014 in the fall. We thought about trying to do that sooner, but there's nothing requiring us to have that done at any particular time. So we're just going to move it beyond the pressure time with gaming, so we don't have conflicts going on at that point. And then we've got the second set of rules that will be coming forward. Jennifer and I have to meet to identify some more information long-term to add to this chart that we have now. And I'm going to be meeting both with Mark regarding problem gambling and with Jill regarding diversity, workforce supplier and diversity schedules.
To add those two components to the chart?
Yes.
Good, okay.
Yes.
You just stole my thunder.
So that's where I'm at with
All right, well, that's.
Great work.
It's great stuff, and the key thing, obviously, is to figure out what's going to replace January 15th, and then rejigger this to accommodate whatever that date is.
Right.
And, you know, as sooner the better.
And I'm anticipating that may result in some budget changes as well. But Enrique and I too have been talking about the need, probably first meeting in November, to come forward with a quarterly budget report.
He's been very clear that we have plenty of money, so don't worry about it.
That's what I heard.
I have to correct the record in the opposite, but yeah.
There is you also had a list of policy, potential policy items that are in the commission packet as well. That's really just an initial shot at assignments, consolidated some new information, some old information. We've got to go back through that and make sure that we've got all the old information and discuss with staff what actually we can, who should be moving forward on which topic. So I've got some coordination to do, but I wanted to give you an idea of what those topics were.
Great.
That's great.
Great,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Todd.
Time for a motion?
I think we're getting close. Yep, I think we're all done.
Yeah.
Do you have a
I move-
motion?
I move.
Anybody second?
Adjourn.
In favor? Aye, ayes have it. Hooray.
Quick,